Hi, welcome back. So this behind me is Coalhouse Fort. This is where it all started, or at least this is where the YouTube channel started on Boxing Day 2013. I got the car in October 2013, 10 years ago. We come over and my nephew filmed the very first video that I ever made here at Coalhouse Fort. In this video, we're going to go through that 10 years of owning the car, all the ups and downs. So let's get stuck in. 10 years, 62,000 miles and just over 175,000 on the clock now. So I guess you guys want to know what it's like to really live with a Boxster 986. I wasn't really sure how I was going to structure this video. I've decided to break it up and do it year by year. So we're going to start off with the last couple of months of 2013 and 2014. I bought the car as a spares and repairs with a long list of problems, and as always a few problems that weren't on the list. However, the guy was using the car, so that gave me a bit more hope. I decided to focus on the engine first. So it was an oil change, oil filter, air filter and plugs. I also changed all the coil packs on it, and I had to replace the drive belt and the drive belt tensioner pulley because the pulley was noisy and the belt was completely shot. The water pump was absolutely pouring water out, so that I had to change, and while I was changing that, I changed the thermostat as well. The car is now on its second water pump. About 2 years ago, the bearing in the water pump started getting noisy, so I replaced that again with another new water pump. So, after I had the engine sorted out and all running fine, the next problem was the exhaust. The exhaust was absolutely rotten, so I replaced the exhaust with a stainless steel system, custom built. The main thing, I wasn't worried so much about a performance system, I just wanted a system that came with a lifetime guarantee. That was followed by the clutch. Now I knew there was a problem with the clutch because the thrust race was really noisy, and in the clips where we were showing off the exhaust you can hear that I was having trouble with the gear changes. And the clutch literally just disintegrated, so I had to get a new clutch put in it, and that's still in it, that's still going strong now. And then finally we changed the starter motor. The starter motor, essentially, it sounded like a bag of nails. It worked, but it sounded like a bag of nails every time you started the car. And I am now on my second starter motor because, again, a couple of years ago, that one started getting lazy. When the car was hot, it was turning over really slowly, like the battery was flat. When the car was cold, no problem at all, spun over fine. So we're on our second starter motor. Anyway, let's get ourselves going. Next on the list of things to do were the brakes. I have never seen discs that badly scored in the 40 odd years that I have been playing around with cars. But somebody had changed the pads, but obviously the pads were destroyed because of the state the discs were in. So I ordered new pads and new discs for the car. So while I was waiting for those to turn up, I decided to have a bit of a refurb on the calipers, clean the calipers up and paint the calipers. Now that was quite a controversial video because first, everybody said that it was a rubbish job and it wouldn't last 5 minutes. And that was like 9 years ago, well, 10 years ago now. And secondly, I got loads of comments about how stupid and foolish and dangerous it was getting paint on the discs. And I couldn't see the logic there, because I thought I'd made it clear that I'd ordered new discs and new pads. So it was irrelevant. It didn't really matter if I got paint on the old discs, because they weren't going to be used. But there you go. So then, now having these really nice shiny new looking calipers and nice shiny new discs, the next thing that occurred to me was to look into having the wheels refurbed and replacing the tyres. Well, when I looked into the cost and the options and that, I decided I might as well just go for new wheels. So I went for the Turbo 2s, because I bought them as an aftermarket wheel, but they are actually the same rims that Porsche use. So essentially you're getting Porsche wheels at a fraction of the price. Once I put the wheels on the car, it looked a bit unbalanced, so I then added the side skirts to just kind of butch up the side of the car, build out the side of the car to kind of make the whole thing look a bit more balanced. And then I finished it all off by having the side scoops carbon fibre dipped. So now that I had the car, hopefully in a good, reliable mechanical condition, it was time to put it to the test. And I took the car for its first long distance run up to North Yorkshire. I went up to visit Whitby, and a little village where they filmed a TV program called Heartbeat, and no problems whatsoever. Car run like a dream, didn't give me any issues. Fantastic. When I got back and I started editing the footage for that video, it became very obvious to me that the orange indicator lights made the car look very, very dated. So I then updated all the lights to the white indicator lights, and part of the process I ended up with LED lights. So I then went on and changed any remaining bulbs to LED as well. Obviously the advantages of LED is they're more reliable, they last longer, and of course they use a lot less electricity, so it's better on your electrical system all round. It's less load on your battery, less load on your alternator, better for everyone. Sadly, the year came to an end with a bunch of Christmas party goers getting drunk and deciding to attack a few cars in the street, and unfortunately the Porsche was one of them. But a new year awaits. So that was most of the repair work from the spares and repairs is now sorted out and all okay. The first thing we did in this year was clean the throttle body, because I had a little bit of a hesitation issue on the throttle body. Earlier on this year, 2023, I actually replaced the throttle body with a new throttle body. So the next thing really was more preventive maintenance. I decided to replace all the track control arms, the drop links and the trailing arms. They didn't really need replacing, but it tightens up the car. The suspension doesn't feel so loose and that, and yeah, it was a high mileage car that worked hard, so to my mind it's an investment to do that. A few months after that, the rear spoiler jammed. One side came up, the other side didn't. So then I had to replace the rear spoiler. So I was still having a bit of a hesitation problem with it, and we thought it might be the oil air separator. So and that was leaking a bit of oil as well. So that was the next thing on the list to change. It didn't have any effect on the hesitation problem, and it turned out there's like a rubber bellows on the air separator, and that had split and was leaking oil, and could have just changed the bellows, but I'd already bought the oil air separator, so we changed the whole lot. And then finally, for repair work, was the brake booster. I was getting a kind of a sucking, hissing noise from the brake booster, so we had to change that. Why we changed that? Porsche do an update kit for it, because apparently the early ones used to leak water inside the car. So we changed we added the update kit and we replaced the booster. And then I finished the year off with another long run up to Wales to try the car out again. And again, as with the Yorkshire run, it performed absolutely perfectly. And that really brings us to the end of 2015. So one of the first jobs I had to do in 2016 was change the vent on the fuel filter, because that started sucking air as well, and you get that kind of sucking noise when you turn the engine off. Not too much of a problem, but it is quite difficult getting up the back of the wing. Then later on in the year I started getting some sort of hiccuping on the car, which turned out to be, oddly enough, both the oxygen sensors had failed at the same time. So I had to replace the oxygen sensors on each side. It's not that bad to change them. I use the Bosch oxygen sensors, which are the same ones that Porsche use, but if you buy them from Bosch, they're literally half the price. But they do tend to rust in, and you have to get them really, really hot with a torch to get them out reasonably easy. I did do a video on that, which is well worth watching. I noticed while I was doing the oxygen sensors that the exhaust manifolds, not the exhaust system because I'd already replaced that, the exhaust manifolds were really quite rusty and rotten. So I decided to change those for stainless steel manifolds. Now that is, if you're thinking of buying a Boxster, that is most definitely one of the things I would look into, because they have a problem with the bolts rusting into the engine, and most of the times the bolts will snap, and then you have to get them drilled out, and you have to get them either retapped or the little coil things put in there so that you can put the bolts in. And that is a job for a professional, and that can be quite expensive. So that is something you definitely need to look at on the car when you're thinking of buying one, and definitely budget in for. I think it was around £400 or £500, but again there is a video on that. And that brings us to the end of another year. Okay, so 2017 started off with a problem I've come across with cars in the past, so I kind of had an idea of what it was likely to be. And that was, every morning I had a flat battery. You jump start the car and the car will be fine the rest of the day, no problem whatsoever. You come out the following morning, flat battery. So the battery was going flat overnight. So I did a few tests, and again I made a video on this. I did a few tests to check out what was happening, and the battery was being drained. And it's a common problem. In the alternator you have a little control unit, and when that fails it drains the battery. So when you turn the ignition off, that stops the alternator from draining the battery. So I had to change that little control unit inside the alternator. I didn't replace the alternator, just the little control unit. So that was followed later on in the year by I got a warning light come up for the emission control system, and it turned out to be the charcoal canister under the front wing. So I had to strip that out and replace the charcoal canister under the front wing to put that right and solve that problem. So the next job I did was not a problem with the car, it was an upgrade I decided to do to the car, and that is the leather interior. I managed to get a full leather interior for the car in the same colour that the interior was in. I had to re-dye the seats and clean the leather up, but I basically put all the leather interior in the car. I've got a leather dashboard, and I will be honest, that is still in my friend's garage. I've still got to finish doing the dashboard. I will do it, and one day it will go in the car. The final job of the year was I got a kind of intermittent hesitation on the car, kind of kangarooing, and I couldn't find it, and I had a couple of garages look at it and put it on their diagnostics, and they couldn't find anything wrong with the car. And the big problem was it was intermittent, it wouldn't do it all the time. Then one day I was trying to look into it. I had the laptop set up on the seat with the diagnostics on, and basically made myself a cup of coffee and a sandwich, and now I'm getting attacked by flies. Go away! I made myself a cup of coffee and a sandwich, and I was sitting there eating this sandwich and drinking the coffee when I noticed that the indicator for the throttle position was flickering around on the laptop, yet I was nowhere near the throttle pedal. My feet were like I am now, they were outside the car. So I decided to watch it, and I sat there for about half an hour and watched this needle, and it didn't move and it didn't move, and then suddenly it would flicker, and then it didn't move for ages, and then suddenly it would flicker. So I thought, excuse my French, got you bastard, and I swapped over the throttle position sensor. So it shows you, even with like the modern diagnostics, if it's an intermittent problem, it can be really difficult to find. And that brings us to the end of 2017. So that brings us into 2018. And that year started off quite badly, because I come out one morning and I found oil in the water. And the strange thing was, when I checked, there was no water in the oil, which is sort of unusual. When if it's a head gasket or something, they usually mix both ways. It turned out to be the oil cooler on top of the engine. It actually turned out to be one of the O-rings in the oil cooler. But you know me, I changed the whole oil cooler. That was followed by the handbrake snapping. That is something I've definitely never come across in any other cars. The handbrake in these are aluminium, or I think they're cast aluminium, and I literally pulled the handbrake up and it came off in my hand. So I had to put another handbrake in the car. After that, when we moved into the summer, I decided to go a little bit further with the upgrades on the body. I'd done the wheels, I'd done the side skirts, and the scoops on the back. So I decided to get the GT freestyle front bumper, and I had that fitted. And you had to do the meshing yourself because it's an aftermarket bumper. I love the bumper to pieces, but it's hard work to live with. It's not so much that it's low, but where the front bumper sticks out so far in front of the car, you haven't really got to change the road angle much, and the front bumper will catch. So you've got to be very, very careful with like curbs, speed bumps, and any kind of angled driveways and that sort of thing. It's not too bad as long as you just are conscious of it all the time. You can get away with it. So the last thing I did, I had to replace the tyres on the car, and again, the thing with the wheels, where they're low profile, it's very easy to catch them on the curb. So I actually increased the tyre size on the wheels to try and give the rims a bit of protection. So the tyres sat out a little further than the rims to give the rims some protection. The last thing I had done that year was the centre console painted silver, just to try and brighten up the inside of the car and just uplift the inside of the car. Okay, welcome to 2019. In 2019, I only really had two issues with the car, and they were quite straightforward really. Had to replace the front pads and the front discs. While I was doing that, I also changed the rear pads. The rear pads didn't really need changing, but I thought if I'm doing the fronts, I might as well change the rear pads as well. The rear discs didn't need changing. The other issue I had that year was I started getting a knocking noise on the front of the car, which turned out to be a dead anti-roll bar bushes. So I replaced all the anti-roll bar bushes, front and rear, with them flexi nylon bushes, and that really was it for 2019. Right, so now we're up to 2020, and one of the first jobs I had to do, the centre console armrest in these are plastic, and apparently it's quite common that they break. Now you can get a repair kit, which essentially is a metal hinge and some pop rivets, but they're about £30, but they're quite difficult to get hold of. And you know me, I did some measurements and I found that a standard butt hinge that we'd use on a door does the job just fine. So if you buy some pop rivets or some screws and a butt hinge, you can easily repair your armrest hinge. So that was pretty straightforward. The next job I had to do on the car was really no fault of the car's whatsoever. Unfortunately, I left it parked. I had to leave it parked out in the road one night, and some jackass clipped the bumper and smashed the indicator light. So I had to do a repair job on that. It was okay for a few months, but eventually I replaced both the indicators because I just wasn't really happy with it. The final job and the big job in 2020 was the hood. The back window was getting really bad on the hood and it was starting to split. So I had a brand new hood put on the car, and that was it for 2020. So 2021, I got a little Ford Fiesta as a runabout. So the Porsche became a second car. It was no longer my daily user. It was just kept for best. And the two main things I did that year, which caused a lot of controversial, was the rear wing and the lift wing. I put the upgrade lift wing on it. Now this is not the wing. Initially I put the aftermarket wing on because at that point in time you couldn't get the GT4 wing. But as you can see now, I've swapped that for the GT4 wing. And then the final thing I did in that year was have the car completely resprayed, because I had the problems with the front bumper and it had a couple of other little marks around it. So I thought, sod the expense, just get the whole car repainted. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention that I did that year was a few more upgrades on the interior. I changed the seat belts to red. I bought a new leather cover for the armrest, and I bought a new gear shift, and with the gear shift gaiter and everything, so that just brought the interior up just a bit higher standard still. So 2022 was a real quiet year. Obviously you're getting the car better and better each year and in better and better condition each year, and the only real problem I had in 2022 was the roof jammed. It went halfway open, twisted slightly and jammed solid. We couldn't really find a definitive answer to what went wrong with the roof, so we ended up essentially changing all the cable drive, all the gearbox and the motor and everything on it to fix that. Which brings us now to 2023. The only thing I've had done on in 2023 is had all the tracking and the geometry redone on it. Mainly I increased the caster angle on the front to 9 degrees, which is similar to what the sort of GT cars have, and I think it's because of the big wheels. And that just makes the steering was a little bit sort of light and twitchy, and it just makes the steering feel a bit more solid. I think I might have missed in one of the earlier years that I did swap out all the trailing arms for adjustable trailing arms, but that was only a couple of years ago. And that's where we are today. So where do we go from here, moving forwards into the future? Essentially it's just keeping the car well maintained. It's trying to get everything that little more perfect. I've got no real big plans to change anything on the car. I haven't finished the rear spoiler. The rear wing, I'm going to make the GT RS style brackets for the rear wing. But apart from that, it's just trying to get everything on the car as perfect as I can get it, and everything as clean and as nice as I can get it. Yeah, I think a point I'd like to make on upgrades and modifications is, because I know a lot of people think a car should be kept original and standard, and if that's what you're into, that's fine. I think, but when you've got a car for like 10 years, you can get kind of bored with it. So you need to do them upgrades from time to time to just like make it refreshed and interesting again. And of course some upgrades give you modern equipment that would never have been on the car, which makes owning the car and driving the car much easier. So that's it really. That's 10 years of ownership, and boy, it's gone quick. The good, the bad, and in the case of the roof breaking, the damn right ugly. I hope you really found this helpful. I'm thinking of doing a live question and answer session for anyone that might have like specific questions on owning the cars or buying the cars that you would like to ask. If you'd be interested in that, then please let me know in the comments and I will see what I can arrange for you. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, please hit the notification buttons. It helps the channel, it helps other people to find the videos, and I will see you on our next adventure. Bye.